expecting from Poilievre today? What are you expecting from Poilievre today?
Set out the missions and looking forward to a collaborative session.
Prime Minister Mark Carney arrives on Parliament Hill saying he looks forward to a collaborative session in Parliament. We'll see. Hi there, I'm David Cochrane in Ottawa, and this is CBC News special coverage live from the foyer of the West Block because MPs are back. And this hour, Prime Minister Mark Carney will face off for the first time against Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre during question period. Now, Poilievre has been on a hiatus from the House of Commons since he lost a seat in the spring election. But last month, he reclaimed a seat in Alberta. He was sworn in on Friday, and today marks his return to the House of Commons. Prime Minister Carney, of course, won his own Ottawa area seat in the spring election, making his question period debut in May. But facing off at that time against Andrew Scheer, who stepped in, temporarily at least, as leader of the opposition. Well, today all eyes are on the House. That's not Pierre Poilievre, but Pierre Poilievre will be the leading off question period. He will get his first chance to challenge Mark Carney in question period. Here with me on the Hill is the CBC's chief political correspondent, Rosemary Barton. So, Rosie, this is a confrontation, a one-on-one that we haven't seen since the debates, and I think one that people were anticipating. Well, what's your sense of where we think this will go today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting because we haven't seen Pierre Poilievre, obviously, since the election, and we haven't seen Mr. Carney up against him. I would say that when we left, remember the House only sat for about 3 weeks, we did see the Prime Minister get a little bit of his footing in question period, understanding that this is a moment of theater, which probably isn't something he was too familiar with, as much as it is about accountability. He tended to use a lot of humor in the answers to his questions. Sometimes I think maybe too much, frankly, going a little too light on some of the answers. But now he's confronting something else and someone who has an enormous amount of experience inside the House, and probably shouldn't be underestimated. But by the same token, I don't think we're going to see a different Pierre Poilievre here today. There's some of the slogans that he's not saying anymore, but ultimately his tone is his own because he is who he is. So I think you will see him be aggressive and assertive and talk about some of the issues that he's been talking about through the summer.
It's interesting. This is sort of the third big act, I think, for the Prime Minister since winning the leadership. He had, of course, the election campaign, which was largely about the threat Donald Trump posed because of his threat of tariffs. Then, of course, there was the earlier session in the late spring, early summer, Rosie, where they passed things like C5 to start enabling nation-building projects. And now we're getting at least the first list of projects, the promise of a second list of projects, the housing announcement on Sunday for the Build Canada Homes policy. There are the building blocks of a Carney agenda that he is now going to be accountable for after sort of inheriting the Trudeau agenda, and that changes the dynamic a little bit, right?
Yeah, and I will say, and just so the control room knows, I can hear myself back in my ear, just to let you know that's still happening. These things sort of had to happen before the House comes back. He needed to put some big things in the window as a sign that he's moving towards these results that he keeps talking about. So the Major Projects Office, the big housing announcement that was done just yesterday, those were all going to be points of attack for the Conservatives, particularly the issue of housing, which is so fundamentally attached to the issue of affordability for Canadians. So at least now he has something to lean on. They have something to say that they are working towards. I think what you'll hear from the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre is that nothing is happening quickly enough, that it's been 6 months, that you haven't resolved the trade war, that you haven't got any of these big things going to change the dynamic of the economy, which, as you know, is not in a great place. Whether 6 months is enough time, I think is probably up for debate, but at least now ministers can say, here, we're doing X, Y, and Z to try to get to the outcome that we promised.
Right. I mean, he's been Prime Minister Mark Carney has since March, when he was sworn in after winning the Liberal leadership, won the election, of course, April 28th, and then the cabinet was sworn in shortly after that, and then the trip to the Oval Office and the throne speech delivered by the King. Just to give you a sense of what's coming, we're expecting to hear from Industry Minister Melanie Joly. She's expected to stop at the microphone outside the House of Commons on her way into question period to take questions from reporters. It is unclear to me whether there is a specific announcement that the industry minister wants to make, of course being a key part of the response to the economic carnage being wrought on this country by Donald Trump's trade agenda. So we do expect to hear from at least one of the more senior ministers in the Carney government right before question period begins. But just to give a sense of where we think question period may go, I want to show you something that the deputy leader of the Conservative Party said earlier today, I believe it was. Melissa Landsman stopped to speak with reporters and outline what the Conservative priorities are going to be going into this session of Parliament. Just have a listen to this.
I think you heard our priorities. They're the priorities of Canadians. We still have an immigration crisis. We have a housing crisis. We have a cost of living crisis. So we're going to oppose the government where it makes sense. We are going to support things that make sense, and we are going to expose what they're not telling us.
Okay, that was the Conservative Deputy Leader, Melissa Landsman. So, Rosie, what we're seeing there is that she outlines her priorities. It's the priorities that they ran up their big lead on before the election, and they hope now that sort of the Trump acute focus has passed a little bit. Canadians get back to immigration, housing crisis, affordability, the cost of living, things we're seeing the government pivot to as well.
Yeah, and I think that that's smart, given what public opinion polls are showing us, that those are the issues that have sort of, risen to the top again in terms of Canadians' concerns, and they continue to be real. I think there's another reason that they're talking about those issues, primarily immigration and crime, and that's because Pierre Poilievre is going to face, as you know, his own leadership review in January, and those are sort of core issues to who the Conservative Party is and what they represent. And I think that he's kind of walking a delicate line himself over the course of the fall, doing his job to hold the government to account, but also making sure that he is saying the right things to his caucus and to his base and to his members, so they feel like this is still the guy that they want to give another chance to in a future election. So you'll hear some of that rhetoric, I think, that might be maybe a little further than you might expect him to go, but I think it's worth remembering he's not just talking to Canadians, he's also talking to the people that he needs on his side up until January and beyond.
Is it also because you think that maybe the Trump issue, the Canada-US issue, is not a winning issue for them, and these might be winning issues for them? Because if the public opinion polling, you do see, various gaps between Liberals and Conservative, but there's a pretty large gap between Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre, and the Canada-US issue really puts that into focus.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at that and you look at perception, it remains true that Mark Carney, most Canadians believe, is still the guy for the job right now, and certainly the man to take on Donald Trump. The other reason, though, it probably doesn't make sense for Pierre Poilievre to talk about that all the time right now is there's nothing happening, right? It's kind of at a stalemate in terms of the negotiations with the United States. That, as well, is obviously a point of criticism for the Prime Minister and for the government. But I think that it is still an issue, but they will probably have to wait to see if something happens or more likely doesn't happen before they use it.
Okay, we're going to check in with a couple of our political watchers. They're regulars on the show. You know these faces. Vandana Cotter was a former advisor to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and Fred Delory is a former Conservative campaign manager. Vandana, we've seen sort of the pre-positioning of this. What are you expecting to see happen today on the first day back in Parliament?
I think you see a battle as to who's going to connect the Canadians the most. As it was mentioned, Mr. Poilievre is going to, I think, touch a few things to see what can stick to the Prime Minister. And I actually wonder if instead of going to the Prime Minister directly, if he'll do other tactics, such as hit on key members of his front bench instead. I think we'll see if there's a change of tone, perhaps, a change of tactics, especially because Prime Minister Carney is still seen as the preferred Prime Minister, but maybe there's other areas that he can hit him at. The other thing, too, is who can hit on key issues like affordability, housing, crime, the most in a way that's tangible to the Canadians. I think you've seen a tone shift a little in Mr. Carney. He's been talking about tariffs, about like kind of the macroeconomic pieces, building the economy and protecting jobs, but trying to connect more to Canadians. So we saw the housing pieces he mentioned with Anna Bilow, the new CEO for building homes. So things that are still credible and top of mind for Canadians.
Fred, what's your thought here? Do you think Pierre Poilievre tries to get other members of the cabinet on their feet, or does he just go one-on-one with Mark Carney?
Look, at the end of the day, we presidentialize our elections, whether we like that or not. Those are the people on the ballot. Ultimately, it's Poilievre versus Carney when we get to that stage, and people are going to be looking for Prime Minister versus Leader of the Opposition. So that's what we're going to see. I would expect. There is some cabinet ministers I'm sure they'd like to poke at here and there, but at the end of the day, with Poilievre returning to the House, I think you're going to see him be his authentic self, which he is an aggressive politician. It's how he's built himself up. It's who he's been. I do think and hope that there will be some seriousness applied to it and that they will go after Carney in terms of the expectations that Carney himself has set. This is a government that has set very high expectations throughout his leadership race and then the campaign and then for the last number of months leading into the return. And I believe Poilievre's opportunity is to now contrast versus those expectations, see what's getting done, and seeing how we move into the next months or years under this government.
So Fred, on that, the two big announcements to this point by the government on semi-specifics are the first list of the major projects, which we saw last week, and then the Build Canada Homes housing announcement on Sunday, creating a new agency. Mr. Poilievre was very dismissive of the projects, calling it pathetic, saying all that he's done is build an agency that's going to get an email and maybe forward the email. I mean, how do you expect him to go at these things? Is that the right approach, or is there something more substantive you expect to see from the opposition here?
I'm hoping to see something more substantive. I think there is lots of holes that could be poked. There are a lot of the projects that were announced were already permitted and working towards being built. So there's different things he could poke at on that he should do and should expose. So I'd like to see a more serious tone on that. I think that's the path for him to be successful if he is disciplined and serious while maintaining his aggressiveness. He is aggressive. He's not going to change. He shouldn't change that. But I do think the element of seriousness, I don't think saying there's an email that all the office is an email, that's just not real. I would be more disciplined and focused on exactly what they're doing and what they should be doing.
So Vandana, just as a final question right now, we've seen the projects announcement, we've seen the housing announcement. My understanding is we're going to see a pretty significant focus on justice issues, at least legislatively, dealing with bail and sentencing and delays and hate. What are the issues you expect to see the Carney government hit right out of the gate to try to build on what momentum remains from the election and just guard against sort of conservative attacks?
Well, I think they know the conservative attack will be the longer things take to actually happen to get things at the ground, the harder it will be for them to be credible on these things. Having sat in a number of focus groups over the campaign, what Pierre Poilievre's base is, a lot of people have a natural cynicism towards government and the ability for government to do things. I think what Mr. Carney is going to want to do is to make sure that within a short time, government is seen to have actually be able to effectively get things across the finish line, get sticks in the ground, and give people the confidence. Like, I don't think things need to be done, but they have to have the confidence that things are moving forward and it's not just some fantasy that's never going to happen. And I think the other thing is to navigate is any criticism of favoritism towards certain sectors, certain regions, et cetera. So I think in terms of showing that balance to make sure that that these things are moving forward, because it is quite difficult. A lot of these things will need corporate sector partners, municipal or provincial partners. So how do we bring that all together in a way that you can really show tangibly that these things are moving forward?
Okay, Vandana Cotter, Fred Delory will be checking back in with both of you throughout this special here as we await the beginning of the first question period of the fall sitting of the House of Commons, as Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre are expected to square off for the very first time in Parliament. They have faced each other in the French debate and the English debate during the 2025 federal election, but they have not seen each other inside the confines of the House of Commons. So here with me on this significant day is the chief political correspondent, Rosemary Barton. Rosie, showing progress on projects, showing progress on housing, showing progress on justice issues. Oh, here comes the Prime Minister. One second. And there goes the Prime Minister. All right. The Prime Minister he does not do these doorstop scrums. He does not like the look of it. He wants a controlled and dignified setting, I think, when he speaks to journalists, Rosie. But yeah, we're not going to be getting him stopping at the doors and saying a lot of things. But showing progress on these key issues, as Vandana said. Moving things through a regulatory process is one thing. People seeing and feeling the tangible results in their lives and in the economy and on the cost of living, that's a whole other thing. The budget becomes a vehicle for that. Yep. But all the pre-messaging on the budget is get ready for a whopping deficit.
Yeah, the House leader was saying to me yesterday that it will be a substantial deficit. I don't know if we're talking $100 billion, but I think that's in the realm of possibility given what has happened to the economy because of the tariffs, the supports that have had to been given to many sectors, and then the promises made by the government. And there are some costly ones, $9 billion for defense, as you know. So all of those things have to feature in the budget, as well as these cuts that we know are coming, and it is unclear where they're going to be, other than the public sector in some form, and potentially programs. Obviously, it's not going to be programs like childcare, pharmacare, and what is already in place for dental care. But there will be things, obviously. There will be grants that won't be given. There will be programs that will no longer meet this government's priorities, and that will be a really difficult moment for the government in terms of explaining these decisions. I think this is the real beginning of Parliament, I will say, today.
Yeah.
You know, we had that 3 weeks that was sort of, I know we were there and there was some legislation passed and started, but this is really the beginning of I think, the government feeling under more intense scrutiny than it did back in the spring, and also feeling the weight of its own ambition, the weight of its own expectations that it now has to live up to and deliver on. And I think, as Vandana rightly said, show some progress pretty quickly. Even if you're not getting big things done right away, people need to see where it's going.
Yeah, let's just play a little bit from Stephen McKinnon, the government House leader. He was out again this morning, sort of setting the stage for the return to Parliament. And here's what he said about the state of the finances in the upcoming budget.
I don't want to characterize the deficit other than what I've already said. It's substantial and needs to be dealt with, and is being dealt with incredible seriousness by the entire government. Mr. Carney has made it very clear that all ministers and all departments must participate in making the government more efficient, making sure that the programs that we invest in are delivering results and delivering on our objectives for Canadians. At the same time, we have to invest in our military, we have to invest in housing, we have to invest in the kinds of things that are very important to keep our economy growing and to make sure that all Canadians have a place to prosper in this economy.
Okay, that's the government House leader, Stephen McKinnon there, talking about and bracing Canadians for a large deficit after many years of already large deficits. And Rosie, this is going to be the challenge because the Prime Minister said on Sunday that a substantial deficit goes bigger than what we saw last year. Now, the fall economic statement is the last fiscal update we had from December 16th of 2024, immediately overshadowed by the resignation of the finance minister who drafted that statement. And if you look through the tables, the deficit she was projecting for the year that had been wrapped up was over $60 billion, and then $49 billion for the years ahead. They've cut taxes. They've made the NATO commitment. Trump has happened. There's all these supports. They say they want to spend less and invest more, but there are restraints on that, right? Because the Prime Minister also said yesterday any job cuts will come naturally through attrition with people leaving and not being replaced. So he faces a challenge of a Parliament where some people may not like the investment side of his plan, and a lot of people may not like the spend less side of the plan. So they have to find a partner to navigate this.
Yeah, and I think he is really counting on these big moves that he's made to attract private investment and capital. Listen, he's an economist. I assume he knows of what he speaks. But that is what those moves were supposed to do, because he also has made it clear that he doesn't want government money backing every single thing, particularly when it comes to the major projects. That largely has to be private capital. So how they do this, I don't know. But I do know that budgets, as well as giving people hope and promise, also disappoint people. And that is also the beginning of something that the Prime Minister will have to start to deal with. The other thing that we need to, I think, watch for, he also said yesterday that he talked to Pierre Poilievre on Friday.
He did.
That he reached out to him. He wouldn't get into the nature of the conversation. Pierre Poilievre said yesterday, listen, I will collaborate when it makes sense, but I am there to hold the government to account. That's my primary role. So how do they navigate that? Because there is some overlap, let's be honest, in terms of their policy agendas, although the process or the how-to, I think, is fundamentally different in terms of the size of government. How do they get to a point where there might be some areas where the Conservatives are willing to say, okay, we're going to hold our nose and do this because we think that it makes sense for the country. Otherwise, he's going to have to seek that elsewhere. The Bloc Québécois, I think, has some real concerns around climate change. I know you've talked to him, the leader, last week. They feel also, I think, that there's a progressive side there that they need to cling on to if they want to get more seats in Quebec in the next election. And the NDP, I think, is just sort of treading water right now. So these are all partners that they may have to seek out as this budget process gets underway.
They will get a question today. I ran into Don Davies as I was walking in. I said, are you guys going to get a question today? Because they don't have official party status, so they're not on committees. He goes, we'll get one every day, and it'll be right near the end. And if you're a pessimist, that's a sign of the terrible result. But he said, they're saving the best for last. So the NDP putting an optimistic spin on it. But, talking about the projects and sort of this intersection we're seeing now of industrial policy and a lot of the Trudeau-era climate policy. I did an interview this morning with Tim Hodgson, and I know you spoke with him over on your show on Sunday, the Energy and Natural Resources Minister. And there are these reports, right, that the emissions cap, which was a key part of the climate plan of the Trudeau government, may be up for negotiations in conversations with the oil patch designed to move towards getting another bitumen pipeline. And my takeaway from the conversation, which you'll see later on our show on Power and Politics at 5, is that the methane regulations and the carbon capture proposal from Pathways can get what they're looking for from the emissions cap. And if you can get these things locked down with those investments, then maybe the emissions cap doesn't need to be a part of the policy. Yeah. Not a lot of Liberals are going to like that, and a lot of progressives are going to like that.
No, but I think it speaks to what the Prime Minister and the government has been saying, is that if we can get a result, we don't really care how we're going to get there, right? If they can put that cap aside and use other mechanisms in order to get the same result, then they're willing to do that. I will just give you a little bit of color from Catherine Cullen, who's in the House. Apparently the Prime Minister went over to say hello to Pierre Poilievre and sort of tapped him on the forearm, and they had a little chat. So that's how things will start out on day one, where everyone's amicable.
Each other gently at the end of it.
We'll see how long it lasts.
Yeah, I mean, look, there was a lot of talk this summer over whether Pierre Poilievre was going to change his tone, change his style, change his way of doing politics. I don't know, Rosie, like talking to people, close to Mr. Poilievre, like authenticity matters in politics, and him trying to not be who we have seen him be for 2 decades now is not going to look authentic, right? And it's just his impulse is to be aggressive and to attack. And they have taken this tack, though, of proposing things, right? The Canada Sovereignty Act, they're going to have a justice bill they're going to try to put out. And in terms of issues where there may be some cooperation, the federal government is going to move on sentencing. It is going to move on bail. Yep. I think some of the things we saw, again, in the Trudeau government may be changed and rolled back. There may be areas there where they can cooperate with the Conservatives.
Yeah, I think that those are sort of natural places for them to cooperate. I think where it'll be more complicated is obviously around the approach to the economy. I don't think Pierre Poilievre is going to be a different person in here today. But I would point out that he does appear to be trying to reach a bigger audience.
Okay, that loud cheer, it sounds like Pierre Poilievre is on his feet and question period may be about to begin, or he's giving a statement. Here we go. Here's Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney in question period.
My mother taught me never to be late, so please forgive me for my late arrival to this session. I had some meetings with extremely important people in East Central Alberta, Mr. Speaker, after which I was honored to be elected by the great people of Battle River Crowfoot. I served in this House. I thank the great Damien Kirk who made it possible, and I thank the Prime Minister for calling a prompt by-election. I wonder if one day he might regret that decision, but in a spirit of good faith, I wonder if he agrees that our goal should be a Canada where hard work is rewarded, where food and homes are affordable, where streets are safe, where borders are solid, and where we're all united under a proud flag.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure I speak for all parliamentarians in welcoming the member for Battle River Crowfoot back to the House of Commons. He may notice a few things have changed since he was here last. The largest women's caucus in Canadian history. And a spirit of collaboration that was shown in the opening session, including in the passage of the Build Canada Act and the projet de loi du Bloc québécois en ce qui concerne.
And the Bloc's bill in terms of protecting supply management. I agree entirely with the sentiment and objectives of the Leader of the Opposition.
I was deliberately flexible on time because it's a special day, but now we're going to respect the 35-second limit. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Some things never change. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my constituents of Battlefoot Crowfoot, who they We had a by-election very quickly, and sometimes the Prime Minister may regret his decision, but I think we all agree with the mission of re-establishing Canada where hard work, an affordable home and homes and food, in safe streets and solid borders, all united under a proud flag. Does the Prime Minister agree with this?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I agree entirely with the sentiment and objectives that the Leader of the Opposition has just expressed for our great country. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, you know, the Prime Minister mentioned how much had changed, and it's true. I look around this place, and when I left, there was a Liberal Prime Minister who was making excuses about breaking promises, running massive deficits, costs, crime, chaos were all out of control. And whereas today, we have a Liberal Prime Minister breaking promises, making excuses, running massive deficits with costs, crime, and chaos out of control. Mr. Speaker, when will the Prime Minister match the grand promises with the real change Canadians need?
Here, here, here. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I understand the Minister, or the Minister, promotion. Come on over. Yeah. I understand the Leader of the Opposition was busy. He missed the largest tax cut for 22 million Canadians. He missed the cut on the GST for new homes. He missed eliminating all federal barriers to trade. He missed. I hope I'll have another opportunity to finish a very long list of what the Leader of Opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
In a nonpartisan spirit, we're simply going to insist that the Prime Minister adhere to his own promises. He promised the strongest growth in the G7 for our economy, and now our economy is declining the fastest in the G7. He also promised that food would cost less. It's more, and food inflation is accelerating. He promised a budget in October, and now we'll see one maybe in November with a double deficit. So, inaudible.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this government has been absolutely focused on improving affordability for Canadians. That's why the largest tax cut, 22 million Canadians, every taxpayer in this country. That's why the cut to the GST. That's why the launch of Build Canada Homes, which will reduce the cost of home building in this country. That's why we back the CRTC to get broadband costs down for Canadians. We are building the strongest economy throughout the worst crisis in our history.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
In the spirit of nonpartisanship, we are simply going to hold this Prime Minister to his own promises. He promised that he would spend less. He's already spending 8% more. He promised the budget would be in October. Now he says it will be in November, more than halfway through the fiscal year. He promised that his government would have a smaller deficit than Justin Trudeau. Instead, now we hear that it might even be double. So a trivia question. Can the Prime Minister tell us, has there ever been a Prime Minister who has successfully doubled the deficit without even introducing a budget?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
It's a trick question.
Mr. Speaker, this government is undertaking the biggest investment in protecting Canadians in the Canadian military. Doubling our investment in the Canadian military from last year when this member last sat in the House by the end of this decade. This government, there's more.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
There's a lot more debt, is what there is, Mr. Speaker. A lot more debt than we ever imagined would be possible. This is a prime minister who said we'd have the fastest growing economy in the G7. We have the fastest shrinking economy in the G7. He said grocery prices would go down. They're going up faster than ever before. He promised to create jobs. He has the second highest unemployment in the G7. He's really reminding us all of that sign at the bar, free beer tomorrow. But you come back the next day and the beer is still not free, and tomorrow never comes. Mr. Speaker, why is it that all of this Prime Minister's promises of yesterday turn into today's disappointments?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think if we are going to build the strongest economy in the G7, and we will, we need to be clear. We need to be clear about the scale of the crisis we are in. We need to be clear about the scale of investment that we need. $60 billion in new projects announced last week. $200 billion in investment announced last week. $100 billion in housing investment announced just yesterday. That's the scale of what we need.
The honourable member for Belleuil-Champlain. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister was elected saying that he would be the best to face the tariff crisis and the trade war. Almost 4 months have gone by, and Canada is not coming out on top. At best, we can say that it hasn't been a success. Can he commit now to put an end to tariffs and an end of a trade war agreement with the United States, his true priority? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the current situation is this. We have the best deal with the U.S. worldwide. Right now, we're talking about more than 85%. 85% is enormous of our exports are covered under free trade with the U.S. We have the lowest tariff in the world right now. That is a success. The honourable member for Belleuil-Champlain. I would contest such statements which would not live up to economic analysis. We would have to look at that in another forum. But the Prime Minister says we have a privileged relationship with the U.S. and it no longer exists. But this statement didn't go over very well in Washington. Can he state today that he is confident that he can reestablish our privileged relationship of trust between Canada and the U.S. administration quickly as the best way to put our trade relationship back on the right track? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Canada-U.S. relationship is good. Yes, we are experiencing difficulties and challenges, some setbacks, but I am proud that this government stands up for Canada, but that's true. I speak regularly with the President over the past weekend in terms of the current situation between Ukraine and Russia and China. We spoke. The honourable member for Belleuil-Champlain. The Prime Minister's rare presence in Washington, both in terms of the U.S. administration and the economic troubles. Well, his absence was noted a great deal in Washington. When did he go for the last time to Washington, and when will the PM start seriously going to the capital city of our main partner and make it a priority, rather than talking about infrastructure that won't even be put in place until the end of Mr. Trump's term? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the U.S. President is a modern man. I speak with him regularly. We send each other text messages. But what's the most important right now for Canada is to diversify our trade internationally with Europe, in Asia, with Africa, and South America. Thank you.
The honourable member for Foothills.
Same Liberal promises, the same Liberal results. Canadians are paying the price for another Liberal Prime Minister's broken promises. This Prime Minister said to Canadians that he would be judged by prices at the grocery store. Results are in. This Prime Minister has failed. Food prices have surged 40% since the last Liberal Prime Minister broke that same promise the last time. Should this Prime Minister's promise to Canadians not be judged by food prices at the grocery store, but the number of families being forced to food banks?
Right. Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister of Housing and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the number one cost for Canadians is their housing, and we have taken action to make housing more affordable. Yesterday, Prime Minister and I announced the launch of Build Canada Homes, which will be a one-stop shop for making housing more affordable across Canada. And we're launching that on 6 pieces of Canada lands, 4,000 homes that we will start building immediately. Thank you.
The honourable member for Foothills.
Canadians can't afford to put food on the table, let alone pay for the Liberals' bureaucracy when it comes to housing. But let's be clear. This was the Prime Minister's promise. These were the Prime Minister's words. This is the Prime Minister's failure. Food prices are going to go up $700 per Canadian family this year. Canned soup is up 26%, apples 14%, tuna 19%. The daily essentials have become unaffordable. Is sticker shock at the grocery store the experience that this Prime Minister promised Canadians?
The Honourable Minister of Housing and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As far as promises delivered goes, this government promised to launch Build Canada Homes and make the largest investment in affordable housing in Canadian history. We are taking action where it matters most, and Canadians need support on affordable housing. Across the board, we need more support, but starting with housing, and housing first, particularly for those on low incomes and those who are homeless. We are taking action.
Honourable member for Thornhill.
The Prime Minister told Canadians that they should judge him by the prices they pay at the grocery store. But food inflation is 70% above target. The grocery prices are up 40% in less than a decade, and all of those years the Liberals were in power. And the cost of food has risen overall more than inflation every single month that this Prime Minister has been here. Canadians should judge the Prime Minister by his words. That's only fair. But is it that he never shops for food, or is it that he thinks inflation is something that happens to other people?
The Honourable Minister of Housing and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, we'll come back to the number one cost for Canadians and concern is around affordability of housing.
That's so true.
I know the Conservatives and the members opposite do not care about affordable housing. We're here to take action on it. Make life more affordable for Canadians, starting with their homes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Good work.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
The minister cannot ignore the problem of millions of Canadians using a food bank every single month. And that hasn't changed. It happened under this Liberal government's watch. And now they're making excuses or changing the subject entirely. Canadians are getting fleeced at the grocery store. And it's only going to get worse because next year their bill will be $700 higher per family. That's another Liberal broken promise, another Liberal bait and switch by another Liberal Prime Minister. So is that the experience that he's now promising Canadians?
L'honorable Ministre des Finances.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
We listen to Canadians, something that the Conservative may want to do a bit more. And what Canadians have told us, Mr. Speaker, is affordability is the first concern. The second is housing, and the third is the economy. What have we done, Mr. Speaker, while the leader was away? The first thing we did for Canadians was to reduce taxes for 22 million Canadians, Mr. Speaker. Everyone got a raise on Canada Day, Mr. Speaker. The second thing, we removed GST on first-time home buyer, Mr. Speaker. And we are going to build with Canadians, with every Canadian, the strongest economy in the G7. That's what this Liberal government is about.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable-Lotbinière. On the day that the Liberal Prime Minister was sworn in, he stated that Canadians would judge him based on the cost of groceries. And let's look at the results of this Liberal system. Food inflation is now 70% above target. Families are paying more, children are earning less, and this is just another broken promise by the Liberals. Does the Prime Minister admit that his own words were just another Liberal deception because the Prime Minister is now just another Liberal like the rest of them? Why is this Prime Minister making grocery shopping an increasingly painful and expensive experience for families? The Right Honourable, the Minister of Canadian Identity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had the pleasure this morning with my colleague, the Minister of Infrastructure and Housing, and colleagues from the Quebec government to launch a project to build 20,000 homes, including 6,000 off-market homes that are affordable to help families and people in the Montreal region. And we're going to do this across our country, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable
Okay, that is the
Member
first taste of question period on the first day of the fall sitting of the House of Commons and the first day of Pierre Poilievre's tenure as a Member of Parliament representing the good people of Battle River Crowfoot, the by-election he won in Alberta after losing his seat in the Ottawa area on April 28th in the general election, and prosecuting his first argument against Prime Minister Mark Carney, essentially saying that the production of this government to this point has not lived up to the promises of this government. We're going to talk a little bit about this. We'll get to Vandana Cotter and Fred Delory in a moment, but first I'm joined here in the foyer of the House of Commons by my colleagues Rosemary Barton, the CBC's chief political correspondent, and Aaron Weary, a senior writer with CBC.ca, who, Aaron, you had the privilege, the luxury, the benefit of sitting inside the chamber. What did you observe from being up above the action as you were there?
Yeah, look, the first day of a sitting is always sort of highly anticipated. The press gallery is always packed. It always, though, tends to be kind of some kind of preliminary jabs, I guess, between the two leaders. In this case, I think there was obviously the novelty of Mark Carney, who is still, an inexperienced parliamentarian, facing Pierre Poilievre in his return to the House, who's obviously far more experienced. There was a nice moment, I guess, before question period where the two of them met in the center aisle and shook hands and seemed to have a friendly word back and forth. I think Mr. Poilievre tried to start things on a kind of collegial tone, even if he was asking the Liberals to agree with the Conservative vision of things.
Well, he started with the joke of "please forget my late arrival," which I remember a Newfoundland MHA who lost her seat and came back 4 years later and stood up and said, "Mr. Speaker, as I was saying before, I was so rudely interrupted." It was very much along those lines, trying to open with the joke, right?
Yeah, and I think to your point, I think this really just sort of picks up where he left off. Yeah. The argument the Conservatives are clearly trying to advance right off the bat is that this isn't a change, that this is the same kind of Liberal government, and that Mark Carney has not lived up to his promise. Now, I suspect Liberals and people who are familiar with the calendar would note that it hasn't been very long that this government's been in office. But that, I think, is going to be the line going forward until this Liberal government starts to show some real concrete results. It's going to be focused on whether it's living up to its promises, whether it's really showing the change it promised.
Yeah, and Rosie, I think that Aaron makes a good point there, that very much when the transition from Justin Trudeau to Mark Carney, it was change, and Mark Carney uses the phrase Canada's new government. They're very much trying to strip away that mantle of change, saying food inflation is still out of control, this is still happening, this is still happening, you haven't done what you said you would do.
Which makes a lot of sense until it doesn't, of course, right? Because a lot of the things that are happening in the economy right now are not actually as a result of anything that Mark Carney has done. They're more a result of Donald Trump, frankly. And the decisions that he's made, I think, have yet to be felt in the economy and in Canadians' lives writ large. But that's fine, hold the government to account for the state of things, but I am not sure how long that argument holds. Now, if the economy craters, we head towards a recession, which isn't a crazy notion at this stage unless things have a turnaround, then yeah, the government's going to have to wear all of that. I will just say from a style perspective, substance is obviously more important, but from a style perspective, I thought the Prime Minister didn't have a great showing there. He clearly can't understand the clock, which is 35 seconds that you have to respond. Listen, I'm on TV. I get that 35 seconds is hard to nail in your head, but he doesn't have sort of a focused answer that will fit into 35 seconds. And Pierre Poilievre does. He is a very good performer. He has a number of new lines, new slogans, if you will, that he's using to attack the government, and he is a much better sort of clippable politician than the Prime Minister. That's something that's fixable. It's obviously not that important, but I think it matters because this is a moment for the Prime Minister to convey what the government is doing, and I'm not sure that he did that very effectively today.
Well, Aaron, it's interesting because it puts Mr. Poilievre back in a dynamic that benefits his style, that he gets to be the aggressor rather than the defender, which is where it has been as Mark Carney sets an agenda outside of Parliament. He can control the rules of engagement in there. And also, that was a much louder, much more action-filled session than we saw in the summer, where the Conservatives had just lost their fourth national election and their leader and had an acting leader. The heckling, the cheering, it wasn't there. So Mark Carney never had to deal with those distractions, and it seemed to matter a little bit in there today.
Yeah, the Conservatives are clearly pretty fired up today. And I think Rosie's right that Mark Carney is having a bit of a challenge getting used to the forum, the theater. There's still a certain sense he gives off of kind of like he feels the novelty of it, that he kind of is amazed that he's sitting on the floor of the House of Commons in question period. You know, like people heckle and he laughs, he listens to the heckles, you know, he runs out of time. You know, he's gotten, I will say, as the session went on, you know, he had a bit of a back and forth with Mr. Blanchet, and I thought actually kind of did okay, you know, returning a bit of a joke. But he still clearly isn't used to that situation. And in fairness, I think most humans wouldn't be. But he's up against someone who is very comfortable in that setting. And you know, as much as I don't want to overstate the value of question period, there is something to be said for being good at it.
Right. And we see Pierre Poilievre back on his feet there. Another round of back and forth. I don't know if are we going to that?
I think that's...
Oh, this is B-roll. I'm
B-roll.
sorry. I'm looking at old pictures, thinking they're new. It's the first day of the sitting, folks. I didn't know we had B-roll this early. Rosie, just your quick thoughts on that. I want to bring a friend of
you and I were talking about it while it was happening, but it is notable that Pierre Poilievre was not the only person speaking on his side, right? He could have taken the whole day. It's his first day back. I'm going to show everybody what I've got. It's what he did during the election campaign. It was all about him all the time, right? And almost nobody else got any time to speak. That's not what happened here. We heard from a handful of strong MPs, Scott Aitchison, one of them up right now, Melissa Lantsman, the deputy leader, who were able to ask questions on specific portfolios to the ministers, some ministers who don't have a lot of experience and some who do, to give them a moment as well. And I actually think that's a pretty important thing for Poilievre to do, to keep his caucus on side and to make sure that he is sharing the spotlight as often as he can, because he has a strong bench and there's no reason why he shouldn't be using it.
Right. Okay. So a little bit of the theater and the back and forth and the dramatic flair of politics on the first day of question period, as Prime Minister Mark Carney has faced off against Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre in the House of Commons for the first time. And the leader of the opposition grilled the Prime Minister on the upcoming budget and the large deficit that is expected. Have a listen.
He promised that his government would have a smaller deficit than Justin Trudeau. Instead, now we hear that it might even be double. So a trivia question. Can the Prime Minister tell us, has there ever been a Prime Minister who has successfully doubled the deficit without even introducing a budget?
We need to be clear about the scale of the crisis we are in. We need to be clear about the scale of investment that we need. $60 billion in new projects announced last week. $200 billion in investment announced last week. $100 billion in housing investment announced just yesterday. That's the scale of what we need.
Okay, some highlights of what we saw there today. We're going to check back in with Vandana Cotter, who is an advisor to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and Fred Delory, former Conservative campaign manager. Vandana, your first impressions on the first day, stylistically and substantively. What'd you make of it?
Yeah, I saw a few things. I saw the theme of affordability. I saw a theme of broken promises. So I think that's what Aaron said, that talk track is going to continue. In terms of the Prime Minister's performance, to be honest, I think if I was in my old job, sitting in the office, I would be pulling my hair out. But from a 30,000 foot view, I think he did fine. I would take some pieces of that and I would actually clip it and put it on social right now, especially when we're talking about this government, this opposition leader doesn't understand the economy, et cetera. I would take the first 3 seconds of that and I would put it out there, because what you really need is just a small piece to tell Canadians what happened, really. I mean, I would hope that people watch Question Period, but not everyone does. I also think his different style could also benefit him. People were tired of the hyper partisan of the House of Commons. They were tired of the back and forth in that way. So I think even his style and looking like he's not that theatrical man, that he's really just a banker and economist who wants to do his job, could benefit him. I think in the long run, let's see how much this message on affordability penetrates with the Conservatives using it. But I think for the most part, Canadians do understand that in the short time frame, there's not a lot that can happen right now.
Okay, Fred, what are your thoughts on this?
Look, I thought Mr. Poilievre, the newest member of the House of Commons from Battle River, Crowfoot, looked pretty at ease in the House compared to the reigning Prime Minister, who's been in since 6 months. Kid, of course, but no, I think Mr. Poilievre was good. I thought his questions were pointed. Again, a little bit lighthearted here and there. I like to again more and more seriousness. I think is helpful to him. And I'd like to see him get to that. I think the questions were good, though, in pointing out where Carney is and where he promised we would be. And I would like to see it. Hopefully, we will see in the coming days or weeks this Conservative team asking questions about where are we going? When are things going to get built? There's so many announcements that the previous Liberal government was really big on. They loved announcements, but not so much getting things done. And that's going to be the sign of the success of this government. Are they actually going to build things? And that's going to be on Team Carney to accomplish. In terms of the Prime Minister's performance, it was weak. He was he's clearly new to this job. And it may seep into people's minds wondering if it's also like that behind the scenes too. Is he actually in control of things? Is he going to meet the expectations that are so incredibly high for him? He did not meet them today in the House. Again, how many people watch this? That remains to be seen.
Fred, do you think Canadians are expecting the Carney government to have delivered on the industrial promises, the housing promises, all these things by, back to school? Or is there a baked-in, acceptance out there that these are big challenges? It'll take a bit of time, especially with the president T-boning the Canadian economy every time he has a new whim. I mean, what's your read of public opinion on this?
Yeah, no, look, I think Canadians will give a lot of leeway to the Prime Minister and to his team to get things done. They do have time, and that's why the Conservatives should be asking questions that set them up for the future. When are these things going to be done? When are these things going to be built? You've announced these projects, you've announced the office is created, you're moving down the road, you're doing what you should be doing, but when will it get done? I think pointed, direct questions on a wide variety of things. The leader of the opposition and his team need to oppose, and they need to prosecute the government in the House of Commons. That's what the role is. And we'll see 6 months to a year's time. They will be able then to go back and measure. We asked this question 6 months ago or a year ago, and you said this. What have you delivered on this?
Right. So, Vandana, just on that point, I guess essentially allow the government to set its own accountability markers, because I know we talked about this on the show many times. We're probably talking about tonight when you're on the show. Expectations management in the election by Mark Carney was to drive them through the roof, was sort of the language he used, right? And now he's in a position where there's going to be an expectation he delivers some things.
Yeah, and governing is hard. Getting through to government and getting the machinery of government at work is an art in itself. Something that at least Prime Minister Carney has understanding of. So I think people will give him leeway, as what Fred said. I think again by next summer, people want a bit of. They want to see action happening. They want to see proof points of what's been taking place. But I do think there was one piece that really hit. I forgot which MP it was, but they were talking about a number of grocery items and how much it costs. I think that talk track will be very powerful because and in my household, I'm the one who does most of the groceries. I would say most people across the country will relate to that. So how do you make these big macro pieces for Mr. Carney tangible to everyday Canadians? I think the other place that I think the Conservatives could get in trouble with a little bit or have a hard time navigating is, yes, the deficit's so large, but what do you cut in this time? Is this a time for an austerity budget a la Mike Harris? I don't know if Canadians want that, but a lot of things that have been traditionally underfunded, like defense spending, like housing, I think people know they've been kicked down so far that it's time to invest in them. So I don't know what people would want to see taken off the table.
Okay. Vandana Cotter, you'll be with me later tonight on Power and Politics. Fred Delory, I'll see you Friday, if not earlier. Thank you so much for being here with us today on the first day of the fall sitting of the House of Commons. I am back in the foyer of the House of Commons. We have Rosemary Barton, the CBC's chief political correspondent, and Aaron Weary, senior writer for CBC.ca. Rosie, what do you make of what we heard there from the partisan response to things and their analysis of it all?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, although I didn't think the Prime Minister did very well in speaking in short clips, I would also say on the other side of that, I don't think that's what Canadians voted for, right? They knew who they were getting in the Prime Minister, and they wanted a serious person who was able to deal with a serious time. So I think he has some leeway, as they both said. Results is what he talks about the most. He is the one who talks the most about results. So if that's the measure for us, then we need, I think, to give him a little bit of time to deliver on some of those results. But on the other hand, I do think that Conservatives and Mr. Poilievre would be better placed to ask more detailed questions. You can't just say crime is up, which, you know, isn't actually true. Yeah. And that there's chaos in the country, right? You can't just say blanket statements like that anymore. And if you want to hold the government to account, then ask precise questions about what their intent is, because I think there's lots of questions about that still.
Okay, I got 30 seconds, and we got to send it back to Andrew Nichols. Aaron, your thoughts?
Yeah, look, as I said earlier, you don't want to overstate the value of question period. If question period was all that mattered, Tom Mulcair would be Prime Minister right now. And at the same time, I think it is a major forum for the Prime Minister to defend his agenda. And I think you are seeing the first sort of signs of where the debate is going to go in terms of promises and expectations. I think the next big thing will be the budget. I think that is what will really set the debate going forward about what the federal government needs to do. Right, and Pierre Poilievre suggesting there in question period today, the budget is going to be in November. The government House leader said this morning it's going to be in October. We're trying to figure that out. I did like Fred Delory's take that the rookie MP for Battle River Crowfoot was more comfortable than the sitting Prime Minister, but there we are. Aaron Weary, Rosemary Barton, I'm David Cochrane. Thank you for watching our special coverage of the first question period of the fall sitting of the House of Commons. I'll be back later with a special edition of Power and Politics live from right here on Parliament Hill. But lots more to come on CBC News Network with Andrew Nichols, so stay right there.